Hi there, Steve Kaufman here. So today I'm going to start answering some of the questions that I received when we had our little competition. Tell me what you would like to talk to Steve Kaufman about if you had a 30-minute Skype session. Let me say as well that we're trying to schedule this online session with our winner, Daniel Candido, I think his name was. So Jareen of our office is going to try to set that up. It won't be next week because I'm busy with visitors, but we'll be doing that. But in the meantime, I thought I would try and address some of the other questions that we received. And I'm going to do them in no particular order. Our office has put them together in a list, and I'll simply go through them. And if you have additional questions, please don't hesitate to send them along. So, actually I can see this. If I won a coaching session with Steve, I would ask for advice on how to improve my English from intermediate 2 to advanced. Okay. First of all, the difference between intermediate 2 and advanced is sometimes difficult to define. When we are fairly advanced in a language, like intermediate 2, we are often more conscious of our shortcomings than the people we're talking to, who think we speak very well. And we feel that there's stuff that we didn't understand or things that we had trouble saying. So that it's a very fine line. So that's point number 1. So don't be too harsh on yourself. Point number 2, the only way you can improve in a language, whatever your level, is to continue to engage with the language and to challenge yourself. So if you're at advanced or at least intermediate 2, you want to improve in English, you have to read more and more challenging material. You have to read novels, you have to read, do as much reading as you can, listening as you can, and eventually, of course, speaking. In order to speak well, you have to speak a lot. I am a great proponent of input-based learning. And for example, in my Arabic, I'm not going to bother trying to speak until I have at least 3,000 words. But I know that eventually, in order to speak well, I have to speak a lot. Those languages that I speak the best are the languages that I've spoken the most, but also the languages where I have read the most and listened the most. So now, on the positive side, when you are at the intermediate 2 level, you are now at a level where the language is enjoyable. You can, in fact, read on a variety of subjects, watch movies, engage with people. You can do all these things that are, going to improve your language, and you can do them as part of your slow process of improvement. So, in summary, don't be too hard on yourself. You're probably better than you think. And the only way you can move along to reach a more advanced level is to read more, listen more, and speak more, and write more. So just keep on doing more of the same. That would be my answer to that question. Second question was, how do I improve my listening abilities in Japanese? I've been studying for 8 years. I often have this question about listening comprehension. Listening comprehension is in some ways the most difficult skill. And I remember living in Japan, I was doing business in Japanese, I was reading a newspaper in Japanese, but when I was watching Japanese movies, lots of it I still couldn't understand. It just takes a long time for the brain to get used to this new language. And I think the only way to improve our listening ability is to listen. But I find that when I listen in languages where I'm fairly advanced and I keep on missing certain parts, I want to have the text. I want to listen to content where I can also read and look up the words. And of course, if I'm using link, I save the words and I might see them again. In other words, you have to, as I say, so much in language learning is a matter of training the brain. So if you just let the language go off in the background and you're not sort of zooming in on those phrases that you have trouble picking up, maybe you won't get them. You might get them on the 3rd or 4th or 5th time, but you may not. So therefore, I think you should make it a practice. For example, if you're very advanced in Japanese, get yourself an audiobook. I know there are audiobooks in Japanese. I have some. In fact, there are audiobooks of 19th or early 20th century literature. I have some. There are also political the NHK tapes. I don't know if the texts are available. You have to go out there and find material where you have both the audio and the text. and then listen to it, and then read it, and if you're using links, save words and phrases so that you gradually train your brain. It's a gradual process. It's not a matter of, oh, well, I give up, I'll never get any better. You have to deliberately work at it. Next question here. I would ask for advice on how to learn another language more efficiently and how to improve my English even. Well, I think this is more of the same. Whatever your level, you have to put that time and effort into it. And it is a slow process. And maybe one more. How would best way to transfer reading skills into speaking skills in Chinese? I mean, it's all the same. All of us, we may be more advanced in some skills than other skills. So if some people, in fact, are better at spoken Chinese and not at written Chinese, then you have to put more effort into those skills that are lacking. Speaking in Chinese, conversation in Chinese is difficult because Chinese has somewhat fewer sounds, it has the tones, and also, unfortunately, Chinese people from different parts of China pronounce Chinese in different ways. So you may find it easy to speak to someone from Dongbei, and you may not understand someone from Shanghai or from even from Beijing, who may be speaking something very close to Mandarin. So there again, what can I say? Continue your reading, do a lot of listening, but see if you can find people with whom to speak. To speak well, you have to speak a lot. There is no shortcut. You can't go from just listening and reading and bingo, all of a sudden you can speak. It doesn't work that way. You build up your basic capability in the language, your vocabulary, your ability to comprehend, your sense of the language, but then you have to activate it. And to activate it, you have to speak, and you have to speak a lot. All right, and maybe the last one here, how to work on my pronunciation. Okay, pronunciation. First of all, let me say that I have interacted with non-native speakers of English who spoke English extremely well, who used words well, who expressed themselves with eloquence, and had a fairly strong accent, and it never bothered me. Pronunciation only becomes an issue if people can't understand you. When people hear an accent, but they hear someone who speaks very well, I think they're almost more impressed. I love listening to people with a French accent or a Japanese accent or whatever who just use the language well. So your first task is to use the language well and to understand well, because there's nothing worse than talking to someone who seems like not to understand what you're saying. Now, next question. The pronunciation itself. I've always said the most important thing is intonation. If you can get the intonation of the language right, a lot of the pronunciation, the individual sounds will fall into place. Also, if you get the intonation right, that's very pleasing to the ear of the native speaker. It's more important, in my view, than the individual vowel sounds or consonant sound that you might pronounce somewhat more, in a French manner or a Spanish manner or a Japanese or Chinese or Russian manner. That's less important. Get the intonation right. So how do you work on that? Well, if I were doing it, if I were deliberately working on, I tend not to work on pronunciation because I listen to so much and I don't try to speak at an early stage, so that I listen to so much, like I've been listening to so much Arabic, and Arabic is bouncing around in my brain. When I eventually go to speak it, I'll have a bit of a head start on the pronunciation because I've been doing so much listening. But if at a certain point I wanted to improve, I would take initially a sentence or a paragraph at length, and I would listen to it, listen to the voice, and then I would try to read it, or even from memory, say it, focusing entirely on the rhythm and the intonation of the language. And I would just work on getting that intonation right. Because with the intonation, for example, in Chinese, if you get the intonation, your tones, your individual word tones are going to improve. Rather than trying to focus on, say, the tone of an individual syllable or the pronunciation of an individual word, if you can get the intonation of the phrases and the sentences, I think the rest of your pronunciation is going to improve. So my advice on pronunciation is, A, don't worry about it too much. B, focus on intonation, the intonation of phrases and sentences. And you can do that by having a text in front of you, listening to it, and then reading it or going from memory, and then trying to imitate the intonation. And you may want to record yourself and compare yourself to the native speaker. If you mispronounce the odd word, don't worry about it. Focus just on get the intonation. Okay, that would be my advice. And with that, I've handled a few of these questions, and I will go through the rest of them. And there's quite a lot of them. And if you have additional questions, please don't hesitate. And if you like these videos, please subscribe. So, bye for now.